O Lord of the quiet hours, as the day surrenders to the night, I come before you weary and heavy laden. All day long, I have tried to manage everything on my own, gripping tightly to the illusion of control. But now, in the stillness of this evening, I hear your gentle whisper. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Let this be the hour of my surrender. Let my mind's agitations now settle. I release my grip on the day. I lay down the armor of self-reliance. Tonight, I do not come to ask for more, but to give back all that I have carried. I open my hands, and I entrust everything to you. I entrust to you the rhythm of my days. I leave at your feet the tasks that are finished and the ones that remain undone. I surrender my obsession with productivity and anxiety over time. You are the Lord of time. I trust that nothing is lost. My routines, my schedules, my endless to-do lists, I leave them with you. Let my mind rest from the spinning wheel of duty. I entrust to you the people I love. I leave in your hands those whom I hold dear, knowing I cannot carry their burdens, nor secure their happiness by my own strength. I surrender to you the bonds that need strengthening, and I lay before you the relationships fractured and in need of healing. Forgive my hasty words, and heal wounds left by words unsaid. I release my loved ones into your sovereign care. I entrust to you my material needs and my earthly security. I leave at your altar my finances, my provisions, and my fears of scarcity. You watch over the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap, yet you feed them. How much more will you care for me? I surrender my anxious hoarding and my tight-fisted grip on resources. I choose to trust that you are my shepherd. I shall not want. My daily bread comes from your hand. I entrust to you my emotions and the choices that lie before me. I leave with you the joy that lifted my heart today, thanking you for the gift of laughter. But I also bring my doubts, my confusion, and the crossroads of tomorrow. I surrender my need to figure everything out before morning. You are the God who goes before me. You are already in my tomorrow. I trust you to direct my steps when the path is unclear. I entrust to you my struggles, my suffering, and my weariness. I leave at your feet the unanswered questions, the lingering whys, and the mysteries that pain my soul. I surrender my demand for explanations and my resentment over the things that have broken my heart. You do not ask me to understand everything. You ask me to trust. Tonight, I let the whys fade into the dark, replaced by the certainty that you are working all things together for good. I entrust to you my identity and my purpose. I leave at your cross the pressure to prove my worth. I surrender my ambitions, my desire for recognition, and my fear of insignificance. My value is not found in what I produce, but in the fact that I am yours. You have called me by name. I am your child. I release the need to forge my own destiny, trusting that the mission you have planned for me is far greater than anything I could construct. And so, Lord, the laying down is complete. The burdens that seemed so heavy now rest entirely in your omnipotent hands. The tension of control evaporates into the cool night air. I am empty, a holy emptiness, a vessel ready to be filled with your peace. Thank you for this day, with all its grace and grit. Thank you for the promise that your mercies are new every morning. As I surrender to the night, I ask for your divine protection. Let your angels encamp around me, guarding my home and my heart. Let no fear disturb my rest, for you are my keeper. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. Cover me with your feathers, and let me sleep in the embrace of your unending love. Amen. May this prayer bring you deep peace and a restful night. If this prayer resonated with your heart and brought you comfort, don't hesitate to leave an amen in the comments below. If you found blessing in these words, please like, share, and subscribe so this message of peace and surrender can reach others who need it before they sleep. Sleep well in His grace.